This is Dr. Rob Harter with the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast, Making Your World Better. What does it take to be an effective nonprofit leader today? What are the biggest challenges? What are the biggest obstacles? How should nonprofits fundraise in an economy that is constantly changing? All of these reasons combined led me to start this show. And it's my hope that through this series, people can learn not only what it takes to be an effective nonprofit organization, but to hear from effective leaders who are successfully making a positive impact in their communities. We hope you enjoy the show, as together we hear how they are making their world better. Welcome, everybody, to the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're doing well wherever you are listening, whether you're driving, working out at the gym, maybe you're running, wherever you're doing. We're so glad you're tuning in. I've got a great show for you today, and it's all about leadership. Now, of course, this is a nonprofit leadership show, so that would make sense, right? But I really liked the description, my guest on this particular episode, how he describes leadership. He describes leadership as a sacred experience. And I like that description. And I think as I think of each one of you, as you journey through your role and your leadership impact, you have such an impact on people's lives, right? And not only just the people you serve, the staff and the volunteers you work with, your organization that you lead, you're impacting many, many lives. And so I think the description of a sacred experience is a really good one. And we're going to talk about not just the sacred experience of leadership, but we're going to talk a lot about how do you transform your team? How do you change the culture of your team? How do you implement courageous leadership, particularly when it comes to difficult and crucial conversations? How do you implement creative conflict resolution on your team? That and more. It's a great discussion. Again, my guest today is Dan Tocchini. Dan Tocchini is a longtime leader, coach. He's been a nonprofit leader for 25 years. He worked with ESPN and Disney when they merged together. He's just done a lot of different things, a wide variety of leadership opportunities, and he's got a wealth of information he's going to share today. So I'm glad you're tuning in. Now on to the show. This podcast is sponsored by DonorBox. DonorBox, helping you help others with the best donation forms in the business. Well, welcome to the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast. I'm so glad to have Dan Tocchini on the show. Dan, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Rob. Love being here. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, great to have you on the show. And we're going to, of course, narrow our conversation on leadership, which is perfect for this Nonprofit Leadership Podcast. It's what you've done for a long time. You've led a nonprofit for 25 years. So I wanted to start out with really getting into some nitty-gritty questions in terms of what does leadership look like. So let's start with strategies that you use to really transform leadership teams. How do you do that without relying on traditional motivational tactics or what you call, quote, pixie dust? I thought that'd be a good one to start with.
All right. Well, I work from a principle, like principally based, if you would. And the main principle is what you tend to avoid, what I tend to avoid or, get around will eventually defeat me. And knowing that, it helps. It helps motivate me to get to the tough conversations. I know for most people, difficult conversations, they like to put them off. They don't, they're hoping it'll disappear a lot of times. And when you're working in a nonprofit, there's multiple difficult conversations that arise anywhere from volunteers to, donors to, staff, et cetera. And how willing are you? How accomplished are you? How confident are you in having those conversations? Because those are the conversations that move the ball down the field. They're difficult because usually there's something at stake. And I'm concerned that if I don't do well in this conversation, what's at stake could be lost. So, most leaders often, or let's just say many leaders often try to find a way to reduce that tension rather than deal with it straight up and see it for what it's worth and prepare for it in a way that could increase the possibility of something beneficial coming out of it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great. Well, again, you've got a lot of experience. Could you talk a bit more about your experience? And specifically, maybe you could talk about a failure you've gone through that has really turned out to help you become a better leader and has actually strengthened you as a leader.
Well, I like I said, I ran a nonprofit. It was a ministry for 25 years. And most of our employees were there for 15 years or more. And it was running well. And about year 21, 22, I realized I was done. I just was done. I'd done it. I wanted to go do something else. And rather than speak about it, it was a hard thing to say because I was driving the organization. I founded it. I drove it. I had a board. We were looking at how to move somebody, a succession plan. And only in the succession plan, they wanted me to stay on in a certain way. And I really didn't want to. And I didn't say it. I didn't speak to that. I tried to live up to something I wanted to be rather than say where I was. And I think that it really, in the end, it offended, hurt people. In fact, they told me, well, you lied to me. And they were telling the truth. I wasn't like going around lying consciously, but I could see that my desire to play Mr. Benevolent and try to make it work for everybody when it wasn't working for me, instead of just saying, this isn't working for me, let's talk about how to have this work. And instead, I gave the impression that I was on board with a lot of what was going on, and I wasn't. And that cost a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what did you learn from that? What were some of the key takeaways that have really helped you become?
What you avoid will eventually defeat you. And I avoided the difficult conversation. In the end, when we had it, it was defeating me because I had up to that point said the opposite. And so now I'm very conscious about, okay, what is it I don't want to talk about? Whatever you don't want to talk about, for me, it shows up like a complaint, like a chronic complaint. And if I'm in a chronic complaint, then there's something I want to talk about, but I'm afraid to talk about it. That's why I complain. And so if I can define what it is I don't want to talk about and get that out and prepare, I can go sit down and have a conversation that's resourceful. And even though I don't know a way through, the obstacle is the way. So if I can get into the obstacle, I will find a way, and I'm authentic and honest about it. And that's what I've done for the last, I left that company, that position almost 17 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. You said something really interesting. You were talking about how there was complaints that would be like a common theme that would keep popping up. And then you've learned, as you look back now, those are the very complaints you were receiving were actually telling you these are the issues you're not willing to address. Did I hear that accurate?
Well, the complaint that I had, right, my complaints are indication of what I don't want to talk about.
Aha. Got it.
In a way, a complaint is a frustrated request. I'm afraid to make the request, so I complain because I'm afraid if I make the request, I won't get what I want. And so I complain about it, hoping somebody else will do something about it because I'm afraid to ask for what I want.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. No, it makes total sense. And I like that insight. That's so interesting. When it comes to like courageous leadership, I've had other people on the show talk about that. Maybe you could speak to courageous leadership specifically. And specifically, how does courageous leadership help leaders navigate these difficult conversations you've mentioned, while at the same time inspire innovation with their teams? And I think that's the balance often leaders, particularly if you're the senior leader of your organization, you have to have these really difficult conversations, but you got to keep your eye on innovation, number one, and inspiring your team. How have you done that over the years, and how would you recommend leaders to do that?
Well, courage is an interesting thing. It comes from the French word or Latin word cor, or in French courage, and it means to proceed with fear. It means to face what you fear with the fear. You take it with you. And look, people are 5 times more likely to act upon something to prevent suffering than they are to generate a sense of well-being. So the idea is to let myself see what the potential problem is going to be, what the parade of horribles would be if I continue in the state I'm complaining about. Now, if I'm willing to see I'm complaining because I don't want the difficulty of the conversation. So complaining is a strategy for convenience. I'd rather be convenient than effective. I'd rather feel the relief of the tension rather than let the tension direct me into what's wanted and needed and have a breakthrough. So the only way to face it, I think, is to let yourself see what you're choosing. If I take the short-term gain of relieving the tension and not having the conversation, finding some strategy to avoid it, working around it, etc., then what am I going to end up with 5 months, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the road? And to see that plainly it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to go, oh, I don't want that, which motivates me to do it now, to take the fear in hand and go forward. So that's I have a way of inventorying what's coming. I have a very framework I prepare for when I have a conversation. In fact, when I get off of this call, I'm getting on with a couple partners, and there's a difficult conversation we need to have around just iterating our partnership. We started about a year ago, been very successful. We talked about iterations. I've got some things that aren't working for me. I'm going to sit down and have a conversation with them, because I know that if I don't, what's going to come on the other end of that is resentment and frustration and things that will cause division rather than unity. So if I sit down and say, look, there are certain things that aren't working for me. Let me put them on the table. Love to hear your point of view. And I've prepared to do that. I go through a very specific framework so that when I sit down, I can hear what they have to say and not be reactive, because I can look down at my notes and bring it back to what I want to talk about, or contextualize whatever information I gain from them in what I want to talk about, because they'll give me information I didn't have, which will help me be more articulate about what I'm up to.
Well said. Like that. And thanks for that real life example you're going to be putting into practice here this afternoon. Let's talk about creative conflict, and particularly conflict resolution. When it comes to creative conflict resolution, what role does it play in building high performing teams, in your opinion, and how have you approached that in the past?
Just to what I was just saying about this last conflict, if I handle it well, it creates a deeper sense of trust and confidence in the partners, in the team. And so the way to do that is to prepare and to make sure that I'm clear about what I actually want to get done, and then be able to state the problem clearly. That enables other people to see what I'm seeing, and then give them an example of the statement, so they have an example, so they know what I'm deriving this from. It doesn't mean I'm right about it. It doesn't mean it is a problem. It just means for me it's a problem, and they can see why that is. And then I can let them know how I experience it when it occurs. Like when this occurs for me, this example of the stated problem, I experience frustration. I feel, it could be a number of things: frustration, anger, or helplessness, whatever. I can tell them this is what I experience. And then I can say, and here's how I've contributed to it. So now I've written that down. I've contributed to it by not addressing it as quickly as I wanted to, by avoiding it, by being gone. There's a number of different ways I might have contributed to it, what I did or didn't do, say or didn't say. And I can own those to let them know I see that. And then I can say, if this continues, here's what I'm concerned will occur. In other words, this is what's at stake, I believe, if we continue like this. So they get a sense of my urgency, what I'm speaking for, because my commitment is to this, and I'm concerned if we continue like this, we're going to end over here. And here's the parade of horribles that we may inherit. And so here's my proposal. That's the next level. And then I let them know after I make the proposal, or if I have the proposal, it's all prepared. And then I say, whether you accept the proposal or not, here's how I'm committed. Now that could be, look, this is a game breaker to me, or, even if you don't do it, we can work something out later on, or I'd love to hear your counter, but I'm committed to having this work out anyway. So if I have all that prepared before I go in, I'm much more relaxed to sit down and be creative, hear their ideas, see what they see. That creates a partnership where we're side by side solving an issue rather than head to head blaming each other.
Oh, I like that shift. Yeah, the side by side. I know oftentimes, I've talked about it, leadership can be like tennis. You, instead of fighting against each other, playing against each other, you jump the net and you're on the same team, side by side. I love that image, doing side by side work. The conflict is what you're trying to do together as a team. Now that's really good. I like that.
And the conversation is the relationship. So if I'm talking in the conversation with them about, here's an issue that I need your support in, it's not working for me, love to hear your ideas. Now we're side by side. And the quality of our conversation determines the quality of the relationship, not just with each other, but really with ourselves, our work, and the world as we go forward. So every relationship, I try to remember every relationship's an ongoing dialogue. It's not static, it's dynamic. It's an entity that's evolving all the time. And I mean, you think about it, silence and avoidance are forms of communication. They tell a story just as words do. So, the depth of our presence determines the depth of the relationship itself and the quality of it.
Well, it's interesting. You call leadership a sacred experience. Tell me more about that. Why do you say it's that? And how does that inform your coaching methodology?
Leading, we're impacting other people's lives. We are influencing others. We're influencing them to make decisions that impact their families, that impact their social status, impact their children. In every way it's impacting them at some level. And it's a service to others if I'm really thinking about it. If I just see people as tools, I'm demeaning them. If I see them as humans, then I'm serving them. I need to consider how I'm serving them. How does working here serve them? And not just how it serves me. It might be, somebody might be a great producer, but that may not be good for them, or it may not be working for them at home. That's a potential, like being able to catch that problem before it becomes an issue is part of good leadership. It's sacred. It's sacred to be able to help people think through what's wanted and needed for them to succeed. It makes sure that what they're doing aligns with their purpose so that they have an experience of meaning and fulfillment. If those things happen, well, they're going to transform. And they're going to transform, meaning they're going to answer the issues, the challenges they have with their full participation, there'll be a different person on the other end of it. And part of that's taking responsibility for their legacy on top of it. What legacy are they going to leave at work? What legacy are they leaving at home? How do both of these things serve them? Are they acting in an ethical way that's going to support them, both with their coworkers, but also when they go home and, if what they do at work is a problem, there are legal issues or whatever, that's going to haunt them at home. So in many ways, that's how I see it as sacred, because it's impacting, influencing their life, their loved ones' lives, their community lives. So I take that seriously and think about it when they come on board, and I keep that in mind, because they're not just there to serve me, I'm there to serve them as well.
Yeah, I like that description of the sacred experience. I would agree with you. And I think there's so much at stake with leadership. You're influencing people's lives, as you said,
true.
100%. We'll be right back. Are you looking for an easy and effective way to boost your nonprofit's donations? Well, look no further than DonorBox, the online fundraising platform that streamlines your fundraising efforts, maximizes donations, and simplifies giving for your supporters. With DonorBox, you can create beautiful donation forms, accept digital wallet payments, track donations, and send auto receipts. And the best part? There are no setup or monthly fees and no long-term contracts required. So what are you waiting for? Visit donorbox.org today to get started. That is www.donorbox.org. Okay, another part of leadership that can be challenging to balance, and sometimes maybe as share this, my listeners may say, why lean this way or the other when it comes to these two things? When it comes to leadership, there's this balance between intuition on the one hand. A lot of us have this just innate feeling about things, or this intuition that's been honed through experience. But you've also got this analytical reasoning, right? You got data points, and you want to put those together ideally. But sometimes it's hard to have a leader that has both of those, to integrate those well. So when it comes to balancing intuition and analytical reasoning and whatever data you have in front of you, when it particularly comes to critical decisions, how do you go about making decisions and putting those two pieces together?
Well, I mean, look, if you have an intuition, it's good. First off, I realize that what I do most naturally is probably the thing I teach most poorly, because I'm in many ways an unconscious competent, and many good entrepreneurs are. So being able to get a hold of what you do well naturally and being able to impart that linguistically, in language to other people, be able to put language on it so they can get a sense of how they can engage and maybe save some experience or benefit from your experience, a big deal. And that, I don't know how many leaders really take the time to consider that. That requires some whiteboard time. That requires willingness to get feedback. It requires, a lot more effort than just giving somebody a job description with their deliverables and saying, go get them, Tiger. There's onboarding them, helping them iterate themselves into it, holding them accountable, making sure they're doing the work, but you're there supporting them, standing with them. It's like, show them how to do it, that whole thing. Show them how to do it, have them do it, watch them do it. It's like, do those things and then let them do it and critique them as they do afterwards, etc. Like gradually support them so they can get off and get out of the box and be successful. That takes a certain level of care. And a lot of leaders will say, well, I'm not there to babysit. And they'll see onboarding somebody well as babysitting rather than setting them up to win and then letting them go and then letting them be responsible for doing it. But making sure that they have what they need, they understand where they're headed, they know how to engage the organization. All those things need to be in place to really get them out of the box well. And if they get out of the box well, it serves everybody, including most likely here, the leader. The leader is going to benefit from that.
Well, it's interesting to say that because I think you think about a culture and a leadership or a leader's role in shaping culture. Tell me about your experience when it comes to nonprofit leaders who know they need to change the culture of their organization because maybe it's headed in the wrong direction, maybe it's even becoming toxic. What would you say are some of the key factors that prevent nonprofits from really changing their culture for the better? And how would you help leaders address these challenges?
Well, I think the most prominent one is they're not willing to have real conversations. They're not willing to say what they think, to hear what others think, and to explore it rather than, like if somebody says something that you don't agree with, rather than initially trying to disprove it, why don't you deepen the understanding of it? What is it what causes them to see the way they see it? What do they see that I might not see? Am I seeing what they're seeing? Am I seeing something they're not seeing? Like taking the time in a very open-handed way to fully understand what they're seeing, the scope of what they're seeing. That's a big deal. And most people don't take the time to really do that. I've seen, I myself have done this, made these mistakes of just getting with the team and then directing them onto what I want to get done versus proposing what I want to get done, taking the time to plan it with them, understand how they see it. Do they see what their part is? What could they bring to their part that I haven't considered? Those are all aspects. And if something's not working, they can talk to me about it? Or do they, culture's an interesting thing. You think about culture, it's like this table here. There are certain things on top of the table. Those are the things we can talk about. Then there's things under the table. That's what the culture just implies. We don't talk about that. And most of the time, what's under the table is driving the culture, not what's on top of it. So being able to create an environment, being able to invite to become an environment where people can bring what's under the table on top of the table so we can vet it and come together and see what's wanted and needed for all of us to have this work out well. Or for some of us may want to leave. This is not where they need to be, etc. But having those conversations earlier, not later, is the difference between having it work out or not.
Yeah. So. What's interesting, that leads to really conflict and crisis even in nonprofit or just in organizations in general. In fact, I would say this, if you've led long enough, you will have a crisis, you will have conflict. It's part of leadership. And we've all gone through COVID collectively, and that was a crisis in many ways. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit. How would you say leaders, and again, this is aimed towards nonprofit leaders, how can nonprofit leaders prepare themselves and their teams for meaningful discussions, productive discussions when it comes to conflict and crisis that erupts in their team?
Well, we actually provide a leadership training called the Revenant Process, and it's a 4-day intensive, and it's designed for leaders to come and get involved, and then the difficult conversations come up, so they get a chance to exercise, practice what I've been talking about earlier, and then see how they react, and then get in touch with and learn about their particular brand of reaction, right? And so when they do that, they become, it's like, where can you go to get that kind of practice? That you just don't, you don't get that chance. So we provide a space for that. Or as a leader, your meetings could be exercise. Like you can have, I do a weekly meeting with my team that goes about an hour, hour and a half. And if there's something that needs to be talked about, we talk about it first before we get to the agenda, right? Like if somebody's got to bring something up, they're upset with me or they're upset with somebody else, or they're just having a difficult time out there and they're looking for some coaching. And that comes up, well, we'll take the first 20 minutes, half hour, and just kind of work through some of that. Then people are much clearer when they sit down and go through the agenda. And then if there continues to be problems, we take them offline and we do it asynchronously because, we want to make sure we get the team lined out. And then I might say, Rob, let's talk about this later. Let's get with the team. I'll pick it up with you later. We'll handle it. Those are things I think that are vital in order to really have the team benefit, and that's how you prepare the team. And the idea is it's dynamic. You can't, if you're not open-handed, you can do these things and then people won't talk because they'll know you're just doing it as a formula, and they're going to be waiting for you to jump them,
Right. Yeah, that's good word on that. And do you feel like because we've all gone through this COVID experience together collectively, not just as nonprofit leaders, just as a society, is leadership shifted based because of the crisis we've all been through? What would you say to that when it comes to leadership of any organization?
Yeah, I think it depends on the conversation. Some people are stuck on people working from home. I think you have to look at that case by case. Some leaders want to have everybody in the office. Great. I would personally, if I make a decision, I want to give the logic of the decision to the team so they can start thinking the same way. I don't have a problem saying, I think you should all be here because in this particular event, we ought to have everybody in the office. But, if we're going to do this, but afterwards we can go, like, I'm real flexible. The structure to me can be worked in a million different ways. But yes, I think particularly with Gen Z, there's got to be the willingness to educate them about why you're doing what you're doing. And, it's not like you're explaining or you're trying to ask permission. You're saying, this is what we're up to, and I want to share the thinking with you so you can get on board with it, right? Now, if you have a better idea, great, just ping me privately and let's talk about it. But, and as much as I hear, and I let people know, I'm going to listen to your idea. I may or may not take action on it, but I want to hear it. In case it's something I think it's worthy. I have to believe it's worthy of taking action. I could be wrong. And then if somebody talks to me about this and I don't plan on taking action, and I'll actually say to them, look, I'm not going to act on this. Is that going to work for you? Are you going to still be able to get on board in the line? Because I hear you. I just feel like it'll work better for me to go down this path. I don't have any problem doing that. Now, if we get into a crisis, I'll flat out say, well, do what I ask you to do. Let's go. We're going down this path, and we can pick it up later because we're in a situation where we gotta move. We can't stop and think about it now. So I think a lot of it's the leader's willingness to contextualize their conversation in a way that other people can get. You're working with them, and this is what you're up against, and you need them to get on board now. Or hey, let's talk about it. We got some time. It'll work. I have found, most people think, well, it takes too much time to do that. Actually, no. I've found that if I'm really there and I'm adept at having a difficult conversation, much like I talked about that framework, these conversations, most difficult conversation takes a half hour max. It's not a big deal. But you know what? If you don't have it, it could pollute you for months, years. I've seen it. I've seen it. People don't come to the table. They're hiding information that you need, but they're afraid to bring it up because they don't want to get, in their mind, yelled at or fired or penalized, that kind of thing.
No, well said. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation about leadership. Love having these kind of conversations. Thanks for all you do in this space. For my listeners who want to get to know a little bit more about you and your work, where would you send them?
Go to takenewground.com.
Okay.
That's our website. Everything's on there. There's a free, I wrote a book when I was I was hired to help ESPN integrate with Disney when Disney bought them.
Oh, wow.
And I wrote this ebook. It's not 90 pages, 99 pages. And it's called The Change Imperative. It's free. You can download it right on the site, or they'll send it to you in the email. You can get that. All the training stuff, so you can look through and our services are on there. And then I'm on LinkedIn too. They can look me up there.
Oh, sounds great. Well, Dan, thanks for taking time to be on the show. And thanks for all the insights you're sharing and all you're doing to pour into leaders. I think leadership and those who invest in leaders is so critical now. We need it more than ever. So thanks again for your time and your insights.
Thanks, Rob, for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was really enjoyable.
Hey, friends. Well, I wanted you to know that this podcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to other podcasts. I also want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with others. This will actually help us get this great content out to more nonprofit leaders just like you. You can also join the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast community. Find other resources and interviews of past guests all on my website, nonprofitleadershippodcast.org. Well, thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep making your world better. This podcast is sponsored by DonorBox. DonorBox, helping you help others with the best donation forms in the business.